missing anything. Leviticus chapter 19. It's good to see all of you. We did not get into Leviticus chapter 19. We did Leviticus chapter 18 last week. And what we are going to find here, for those of you that are note takers, let me just show you what your screen is going to look like for the remainder of our time together. That's it. That's all you're going to get. And here's why. Normally I try to break it all up into sections and make it easy. What we're going to find in Leviticus chapter 19 is that there's a plethora of different topics that God is going to touch on. And I mean, just to give you an example, parents in verse 3, idols in verse 4, no mixing in verse 19. What is that all about? We'll get to that in a minute. So there are a bunch of like one or two verses on things. Now there are some larger sections, but he's just going to hit a bunch of different topics. Now, why is he doing that? And what we'll do is, as I go through, I'll tell you what the section is on, so that if you're taking notes, you can write that down. I started to put them on the screen, and I realized, man, they're going to end up being like this big because there are so many topics. But what is God doing here? What we're going to see in chapter 19 is God's heart, or his thoughts, his mindset on all of these different topics. So it may feel as we're going through like, man, we're just hitting all these different things and I really don't get it. And some of the stuff, like, you know, when they get into the land and they have fruit trees, they're not allowed to eat the fruit for the first 4 years. Like, what does that have to do with me? So we'll talk about that, but it might feel kind of like, I don't know, it's just kind of like all over the place. But what we're getting here is God's view, or his heart, again, his attitude on all of these different topics. We want to know God's heart. We want to know God's heart. You will, as you get older, you will eventually find your one true love. And you will eventually want to marry that individual. And you'll just be so excited, and you will want to know everything there is to know about that individual. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Show me your old house. Show me your bedroom. What kind of posters did you have on the window, on the wall? What did you got? How did your mom cook this meal? What kind of shoes did you wear? What was your favorite band when you were 12 years old? You're just going to want to know all of those details. Why? Because you love this individual and you want to do things that are pleasing to that individual. You'll want to do things that they like. And so we want to have the same attitude. A lot of us probably don't, but this is what we're working toward. We want to have the same attitude toward God. God is crazy about us, and we in turn want to be crazy about him. And so we want to find out, what is God like? What is he into, and what does he love, and what does he want us to do? So that's why something like Leviticus chapter 19, a chapter like Leviticus 19, is so special to us. And so there will be some things in here like, well, I don't really get it. What is that all about? I'll do my best to explain those things. But here's what is going on in verse 2. Well, let's start at verse 1, obviously. And the Lord spoke to Moses. God's always speaking to Moses. We understand that. Verse 2. Speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel. It means speak to everybody. And say to them, now here it is, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. So God tells us there what he's doing in verse 2. He's telling Moses to tell all the people, I want you to be holy. Now, most of us have some idea of what it means to be holy, especially when God says that he is holy. Some of us may see that as perfection. Well, God is holy, and he's perfect, so that means that I have to be perfect. And while perfection is something that all of us should be pursuing, God understands, and I understand, and you all understand, that we cannot be perfect. It's a good thing to pursue perfection, but we've got to balance that out with, I am pursuing perfection as far as godliness is concerned, but I know that I can't reach it. I know that that's what I'm striving for, and I know that when I get to heaven that I'll be perfected, I'll be done. God's work in my life will be complete. but I know right now that I'm still going to struggle with sin, with an attitude, with, struggling with my sinful flesh, my human nature. So when God says in verse 2, you shall be holy, it means that we are to be set apart for His service. It means that I'm dedicated to Him. I'm dedicated to Him. And so God says, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Okay? Now, we all wonder this. Okay, He wants us to be holy. Like, what does He mean by holy? Does that mean I have to wear like a white robe? Do I have to walk around with my hands like this just all the time? Should I just constantly be praying and somebody comes up to me and is like, hey Jaden, what's up? I can't talk to you. I'm being holy right now. I'm praying. I can't talk to you. What exactly does that mean? Well, I'm glad that you asked, because what He does, first of all, is He tells us to be holy. Then what He does is He goes from verse 3 all the way down to verse 31 at the end, telling us how to be holy. This is how to be holy in all these different areas. And this doesn't comprise every area of life, but He's hitting a bunch of different areas. Now, the first one He starts with is every teenager's favorite. Every teenager's favorite. In verse 3, every one of you shall revere his mother and his father. So He starts with reverence to your parents. Okay? So if you're taking notes and you go, what is He talking about here? He's talking about parents. And He says that you are to have reverence for your parents. Now, when you were little, you used to look at your parents and you would say, Mommy, Daddy, when I get old, I want to be as tall as you. And your parents would laugh, that's pretty funny. And because they understood that when you got to be teenagers and you're just going to continue to grow. And I mean, most of you have probably, in a lot of cases, you've probably passed up your parents already. How many of you have passed up your parents already? Yeah. So when you were younger, I want to be as tall as you one day. They're like, you'll be that tall, when you're 5. I am not tall, so my son, outgrew me real quick. I mean, that's what happens. But the idea, the attitude, you used to look up to your parents like, you guys are, my parents are so cool. But oftentimes what happens is, not all the time, but oftentimes, that as we get older, we get into our, like maybe junior high, 8th grade year, something happens. All of a sudden in 8th grade, 9th grade, throughout high school, it's incredible what happens. We become the smartest people that have ever lived on the face of the earth. And all of a sudden our parents, they don't know a thing. It's incredible, man. And we're so smart. And man, I got to tell you all of it. You don't get it. You don't get it. You don't understand what it's like. And then something else funny happens, is that when you get into your 20s, you go, Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought you guys were dumb, and it turns out I was dumb the whole time. I didn't really get it. I didn't understand. It's oftentimes within those teenage years, we can feel like, you know what, I've got all the answers, and then the reverence for Mom and Dad begins to drop. We begin to and in some cases, disrespect Mom and Dad. Well, this is the first thing that God mentions. So do you think it's important to God? Yeah. Every one of you shall revere, have reverence for his mother and his father. And then the very next thing He mentions is, and keep my Sabbaths. So, family love and love for God, keeping His Sabbaths. Now, before we go any further, real quickly, because He will mention it later, Sabbaths. Sabbath. Does anybody remember what the Sabbath is? I probably asked you last week, maybe, I don't remember. But what is a Sabbath? Does anybody know what a Sabbath is? What is it?
Day of rest.
It's a day of rest. Okay. It's a day of rest. And practicing Jews still practice this to this day. Friday night at sundown begins the Sabbath. When the sun goes down, they consider that the end of the day, the end of Friday. And when the sun goes down on Friday night, for them, that Saturday begins, and that's their day of rest, their Sabbath. And they practice that. Okay, and that's their day that they set aside for God. Now, most of the things that we read in here, they transfer from Old Testament to New Testament. We'll see a lot of these things are still the same. I want you to understand something about the Sabbaths and the New Testament and Christians. Is it wrong to observe the Sabbath, Friday night, all day Saturday? Absolutely not. If you want to do that, fantastic. However, what happens into the New Testament is that Jesus, we're told, that Jesus became our Sabbath rest. He embodied this special day of rest. So as we get into the New Testament, God no longer requires the Christians, his people, to observe that Sabbath day. Now, it doesn't mean that we should be disrespectful and, oh, who cares about your holy day or whatever. It's okay. Here's what happens in the New Testament. Here's what happens is we go above and beyond. God says, listen, don't let anybody put a trip on you. Paul actually said that. God was speaking through Paul and saying, don't let anybody put a trip on you about some special day or some special holiday. As if, if you don't use that day right, then you're sinful. What happens in the New Testament is that Sunday's a special day for us. Why? Because it's the first day of the week. It's the day that we believe that Jesus rose from the dead, from the grave. That he made himself known on that day, came out of the grave. But for many of us, so Sunday's a special day. You're here. Sunday's a special day. For many of us in here, as I look around the room, for many of us, Wednesdays is a special day also. Because Wednesday night, you're here. And if you're not here, doesn't mean that that's not special. I'm just saying that many of you set aside Wednesday night also for worship. So you do Sunday, maybe you do all day, maybe it's just the morning time, but then you're back here on Wednesday night. For some of you, you show up to the Friday night high school study, and you set aside Sunday and Wednesday and Friday. For some of you, it might be Monday night with your family, you got devos, or it might be your daily devotion time maybe every morning. So what happens in the New Testament is that we're not focused on just one day, but in fact we give God every single day. Saturday's good. Friday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Sundays, Thursdays, Friday, every day. Every day is given to God. So when he talks about the Sabbaths, he's telling them, his people, you need to make sure that you're observing the Sabbath. How does that apply to us? Observing the Sabbath is good, that's fine. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that our lives, not just one day, but our lives are set aside for God. He says in verse 4, he talks about idols. If you're taking notes, so we went from parents, the Sabbaths. Now he's talking about idols. Do not turn to idols, nor make for yourselves molded gods. I am the Lord your God. So God was concerned about this. Don't make an image, a statue, a golden image, and bow down to it. Now remember, they did that in the wilderness. Moses is up on the mountain. They go down there, or they're down at the bottom. They make a golden calf. They worship it. It was part of who they were. And so God is saying, do not do that. In verses 5 through 8, he deals with the peace offerings. Some of you might remember there were all sorts of different kinds of offerings. And one type of offering was called the peace offering. And he says in verse 5, if you offer a sacrifice of a peace offering to the Lord, you shall offer it of your own free will. Don't do it begrudgingly. Don't do it, all angry. Well, here, God, you can have this, But do it of your own free will. Verse 6, 7, and 8, what he does is he says, listen, you've got one day to eat it. You've got the second day to eat it. But by the third day, if there's anything left of that free will offering, you need to burn it. Just get rid of it. Don't eat it on the third day. If you eat it on the third day, he actually says there in verse 8, if you eat it on the third day, whatever's those leftovers, he says you'll actually bear the guilt. You'll be guilty. And the offering that you originally made won't mean a thing. It'll all be canceled out. And then he goes on to say at the end of verse 8, and that person shall be cut off from his people. I mean, that's pretty serious. Like, you eat those leftovers on the third day, man, you're going to get cut off. And here's the thing. We wonder this. We wonder, what's the big deal? I mean, you let us eat it on the first day. You let us eat it on the second day. What's the deal? What's the big deal about the third day? Here's the thing. We always want to go a little bit more. Like, like, yeah, God, I know you you allow us to do this, but I want to go a little bit more. Some people in the Bible, drinking alcohol is not a sin. Getting drunk is a sin, but drinking alcohol is not a sin. But many people use that. Well, God, Jesus turned water into wine, so pass the bottle. And oftentimes, God gives us these restraints, or kind of like these cutoff lines, and then we're like, we get there, but that's not enough. God, like, I want to go a little bit more. I want to go a little bit more. And God is teaching his people, look, for the free will offering, you're allowed to eat that, but only on the first day, only on the second day after that, on the third day. I mean, it sounds serious, like, dude, they eat leftovers on the third day and they get cut off? Well, God's warning them. Don't do that. Just pay attention, listen to me. 1 day, 2 day, that's it. Third day, don't do it. Now, I love this in verses 9 and 10. Again, seeing God's heart here. Verse 9, when you reap the harvest of your land, you're gathering the crops, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. And you shall not glean. To say, what he's describing here is somebody that goes through and picks all their crops, and then they go back through and pick off anything they might have missed. And they just strip it bare, man. He says, do not do that. Verse 10, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Now, how much do you want to bet that some vineyard owner read that? Verse 10, you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. And that vineyard owner said, hey, workers, field workers, go out and gather all the grapes and just leave one grape on the vine. What? He said not every grape, I left one. That's the type of thing that we do. You didn't say. God is saying, listen, make sure you leave enough for the poor. And check this out in verse 10. And the stranger. Stranger danger. I mean, what? We've been taught that since we were little. Stranger danger, man. You don't know somebody, you just stay away from them. And that's a good thing to do. When you're a little kid, somebody's a stranger, don't go taking off with them, don't spend a lot of time, don't be by yourself around that stranger. Even as you get older, it's good to be aware. This is a stranger, I don't know who this person is, so I'm just going to be aware. But you see, God's heart in the matter is that he has a concern for those people that even are strangers, not only the poor, but also the strangers. And so, if God has a place in his heart for the poor and for the stranger, so we should also. A real good place to put this into practice is right here, right now, where you're sitting. You see somebody come in that you don't recognize, or you think, you know what, I don't think I've seen this person before. She's not in here so I can talk about it. She doesn't come in here anymore because she's older now. But Rachel, a lot of you know Rachel that used to be part of our high school group. She was always so good at doing this. She would be in here hanging out, and she'd see somebody come in that she didn't recognize, somebody new. And she was one of the students. And she would just go over and welcome the person on her own. I didn't have to call her, or, sometimes your parents are like, hey, listen, that person's new. Go over and say hi to him. And you go over there all awkward, like, hi, and that's it. Rachel was not like that. Rachel would just walk up and start talking and introduce, and she would even say, hey, do you have somewhere to sit? Okay, you can sit by me, I'm sitting over here. And she would draw that person in. A heart for the stranger. It's a good thing. He says in verse 10, I am the Lord your God, putting his stamp of approval on it. Now, from verse 11 down to verse 18, love your neighbor. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. Okay, we all understand those are bad things. And you shall not swear by my name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. I mean, how many times, you have a friend right now, You know, whenever you're talking, the person always says, I swear to God, it's true. I saw it on Instagram. I swear to God. Or they're making a deal. Hey, can I borrow $6, for lunch? I swear to God, I'll pay you back, tomorrow. And they oftentimes will tell you that and then not follow through on that. Or I swear to God, this is true, and they're lying through their teeth. That would be misusing God's name here, calling in God as your witness when you know that you're never going to fulfill that promise that you're making. So he says, do not do that. You see, if I call in, if I say, hey, listen, God is my witness, then the person is probably going to believe you like, oh, okay, it's pretty serious. God is your witness. All right, yeah. Here, I'll loan you the money or whatever, or I believe you. He says, do not do that falsely. Verse 13, you shall not cheat your neighbor nor rob him. My neighbor had not read this and broken into my house twice. You shall not cheat your neighbor nor rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you all night until morning. Now, we're still talking about in the context of neighbors here, treating your neighbors well. Here he says, obviously the obvious, don't cheat them, don't rob them. But what about this? The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you all night until morning. So let's say that your dad or your mom says to you, listen, you need to go up and clean up after the dog in the front yard. Clean up that mess. You go out there like, oh man, I don't want to do this. And then you see your little neighbor across the street, that little kid? And you go, hey, I'll give you $3 if you come and clean up the dog mess in the yard. And then you're like, you go pull out a lawn chair and you're like kicking back, like, oh yeah, there's some more over there, and they pick up all the, all the dog mess, and they're like, all right, they're all done. Like, where's my $3? You're like, oh, I'll give it to you tomorrow. Don't do that. You've got their money, pay them then. Don't make them wait because, hey, I got the power, man, and I don't have to pay you because I'm bigger than you and I'll punch you or whatever. No, man, you got the money, you made a deal, just give them the money. Don't make them wait for it. Okay. Verse 14. Look how wicked his people can be, man. You shall not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. He had to tell them not to curse the deaf. I know that person's deaf. I hate you, right? Because they can't hear you. Or the person's blind, and so you throw something in front of them to trip them. Wicked. But see, he had to tell his people that, man, do not take advantage of people that are at a disadvantage like that. And he says you're not to do that in verse 14, but what you should do is fear your God. I am the Lord. He says, listen, you treat them well. Don't do that to them. Fear God. To do something like that to somebody that's at a disadvantage, not just the deaf, not just the blind, but somebody that's at a disadvantage, to mistreat them because they're at a disadvantage is to not fear God at all. God says, do not do that. Now, and you guys laughed, huh? So, verse 15. You shall do no, look at this. This is for Tupac right here. You shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor. He was not poor. Well, I'll get to the Tupac part. Nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. Remember, he said, nobody can judge me except for God. Totally false. Well, that was not true. In fact, we're told here that God's people, that we are to judge people, but we're to do it with justice, and we are to do it with righteousness. That it's okay to judge other people, but we have to do it fairly. We have to do it righteously. That we don't have a judgmental attitude toward people. I can't believe you're here and you're wearing that shirt. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about when something has gone wrong and you need to pass judgment on somebody for some matter that's taken place. He says do it with justice. You're seeking justice, and do it righteously. And so we're to do it correctly. Verse 16, still talking about neighbors. You shall not go about as a tale bearer among your people. In other words, going around, don't look at anybody, okay? Because some of you right now, you're going to be like, oh, this is so my friend that's sitting next to me. Don't go around telling lies and stories. Don't look at anybody, okay? Don't nudge anybody. Like, dude, that's you, man. You're a liar. You're always telling lies, Or girl, that's you. You're always lying, okay? You shall not go about as a talebearer among your people, nor shall you take a stand against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. So don't go around the neighborhood like, hey, man, next time you hear what they said, you see what they did. You know people like that. Hey, I heard he was talking mess about you. I mean, I heard that he was in the locker room and he was talking trash about you. But I mean, I'm not trying to start any trouble. I heard that she said that your shoes are funny. The shoes that you're wearing today are funny. And you're trying to stir up trouble between people. Some of you know people like that at school, man. You go to public school, private school, homeschool, there might be somebody at your, at your house like that. Like, they're always trying to stir up trouble, man. And they're always like walking around trying to tell, oh, I heard this and that, and this other thing. It's like, just be quiet, man. Just leave it alone. Even if I heard somebody, Jacob and I are friends, and if I heard, maybe Zach Brown was talking trash about Jacob, I wouldn't go tell Jacob like, oh, did you hear what Zach said about you? Oh, dude, I was there. He said this or said that. What I would do is I would talk to Zach and say, hey, I know he's weird. Leave him alone. I would say, no, listen. I would tell the person that's doing the trash talking, I would say, hey, you knock that off, man. That's my friend. You need to just be quiet. Stop. But I don't want to go around like, oh, he said this and she said that. And don't do that, God says in verse 16, rather. Don't do that. And don't take a stand against the life of your neighbor. You're not trying to harm your neighbor. Verse 17, still talking about neighbors. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. We should just skip that, huh? You're like, man, but you don't understand who my brother. He wrote that before my brother was born. You don't understand. You're not supposed to hate your brother in your heart. Now, he is talking in the sense of neighbor, but obviously it would apply to family too. And I know that happens. I mean, I didn't have any brothers, so I wasn't guilty of this. But I was guilty of hating my sisters at times. There are just those times, man, when they just frustrate you, right? I mean, I don't understand. Why can't your brother or your sister, why can't they just worship you like they're supposed to, right? And then they don't. It's so frustrating. There's times when you get angry at your brother or your sister, and I don't think that this is just speaking to your brother. I think it could be brother, sister, neighbor, mom, dad, anybody. You're not supposed to hate anyone in your heart. And he says, you shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. Your neighbor's doing something wrong, you tell him, hey, stop, don't do that. You don't take part in their sin just because they're your neighbor. And in verse 18, you shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people. Those were your neighbors. Don't treat them wrongly. Don't hold a grudge against them. It's something that's hard to do. Let me say this real quickly before we move on. This is something that's hard to do, is to not bear a grudge against people. I know that all of you in here at one point or another, you've been scolded by a parent. And it's just one of the things that we do when we're young. We get scolded for things. And it's hard not to hold a grudge against them for doing that. I've got kids that are older, and I can see they still struggle with this, even now, because they're occasionally, doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I got to say, hey, you need to stop that, or you need to not do that, or you're not supposed to be doing that. You need to knock that off. But see, I have the ability to do this. I have the ability to say, hey, Cassius, you need to knock that off. You shouldn't be acting like that. Now, I see what you're doing, and it's wrong. And then I can say, all right, you understand? And then Cassius would be like, yeah, I get it, Dad. And then I would say to Cassius, again, because I've done this to my own kids, I'll say, okay, I love you. And then I would ask my kids, do you love me? They'd be like, yes. Okay, well, tell me. I'll tell you later. Like, no, when I leave, tell me right now. Because I correct you, and then I just move on. I don't want to hold a grudge against anybody. And we ought not be. We ought to just realize that, hey, sometimes that happens, and I'm not going to hold a grudge. Let's just move on. Let's just get over it. And he says at the end of verse 18, but you shall, this is crazy. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. I mean, what does that even mean? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. What was the first thing you thought about when you woke up this morning?
Go back to sleep.
Okay? Honest. Yeah, go back to sleep. As I think about that all the time. I wake up like, oh, I hate my alarm. It's just a thing with me, I wake up hungry. Like, I wake up and I'm just like, oh, I got to get some oatmeal, man. I like oatmeal. Coffee, whatever. Think about my day. I wake up. It's like, okay, I need to do this, and I got to do these other things. I mean, that's how we wake up. I mean, even this morning, Sunday morning, I mean, what was the first thing you thought about? This group in here, not so much the first service, but you guys thought about what you were going to wear. But maybe you woke up like, oh man, okay, it's Sunday. What am I going to wear today? Or you get up, you start moving. Think about your morning. I wasn't there. I don't know. But did you get up and like, hey, Mom, I'm dressed. I'm ready early. You need some help at breakfast? I mean, you guys get it. You understand? We oftentimes, most often, I mean, this is the truth. We are madly in love with ourselves, man. We dress ourselves, we brush our hair, hopefully you brush your teeth, we take care of ourselves. We figure out, what's for breakfast, we're cooking something, or is it Pop-Tarts or whatever. We think about that kind of stuff, or who am I going to see today, and what's going to go on, and what's going to happen. We don't oftentimes wake up thinking, oh man, I got to get up, and I got to help my mom, I got to help my dad, I got to go help my little brother that I hate in my heart, because it's Sunday. We don't oftentimes think that way, and yet God says this is so revolutionary here. Verse 18, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Seriously? So when I go to take out the trash cans, maybe I go over, if I'm going to love my neighbor as myself, maybe I'll go over and take their trash cans out also. Or if I'm sweeping up, mow the lawn, got to sweep, maybe I'll just go a little bit further and sweep the front of their house too and just get it done. Love your neighbor as yourself. You see, this is what was going to set his people apart. And this is anticlimactic, but I'm going to tell you anyways. This is what the whole chapter is about. It's about being in the world, but not of the world. It's about being in the world, but being different. And those that love their neighbors as themselves is so revolutionary that we would do that. I mean, what's the prevailing thought of the day? Self-love. You just got to love yourself more. And God is saying, listen, you love yourself enough. Why don't you love other people the same way that you love yourself? I mean, I'm not looking at anybody, okay? Not looking at anybody. But as you came in today, did you just pick your seat because, hey, this is where I always sit and everybody knows it? You looked at somebody like, you better back off, fool, this is my seat. And you just like, or did someone come in and you were like, hey, you want this seat? And they're looking at you like, why would I want that seat? And you're thinking it's the best seat in the whole room. It's my seat. You can have. Did we think that way? Like, you can have this, man, I'll let you sit here. Or was it, I come in, I get my spot, set myself down, I'm going to go do my thing. So see, we want to love one another as we love ourselves. Self-love, we've already got it. We don't need more of it. What we need is love for other people. Verse 19 is so strange. You shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your livestock breed with another kind. You shall not sow your field with mixed seed, nor shall a garment of mixed linen and wool come upon you. I would be so guilty of that today. I got mixed stuff all over the place. What is he doing here? What he's doing, and he mentions it, verse 19, and he moves on. I mean, he mentions it and moves. What is he doing? He wants his people to be thinking singularly in every area of their life. Everything they do needs to be singly focused on God. I need to be of one mindset, man. I've got one thing in life, and that one thing is to please God. I want to please God when I play basketball. I want to please God when I do my English report. I want to please God when I go to the mall. I want to please God when I'm hanging out with my friends. I want to please God when I'm at the house picking up the dog mess. Whatever I'm doing, I want to have that one single mind. I may be doing any number of things, but how can I please God in this? And God is trying to teach them, even down to the minute things. Don't mix. We're in the world. We're not of the world. Stay focused. The clothes that they were wearing would even be a reminder to them. Okay? Now, verses 20 through 22. This is sensitive subject, awkward, whatever, but I'll just say it. Sex with a concubine. Now, what is a concubine? Does anybody know what a concubine is? I know someone in here knows. It's just a matter of whether you're brave enough to say what it means. Anybody know what a concubine is? Concubine. Yes.
Like a wife, but like only sexually wife.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much that was it. A lot of the ancient kings had a lot of concubines. If you read about Solomon, who was said to be the wisest man that ever lived, he had wives and he had concubines. Concubines basically were these extra wives, although they weren't officially wives. It was just this, like a harem, if you've ever heard of a harem. It was just this group of women that he, at his choosing, could choose whoever he wanted for the night. Sounds bad. It is bad. It wasn't something that God was okay with. There was a time when he allowed it, but it doesn't mean that he was okay with it. Discussion for another time, but here let me read this. Verse 20. Whoever lies carnally, that's a nice way of saying that they would have sex. Whoever lies carnally with a woman who is betrothed to a man as a concubine, and who has not at all been redeemed or given her freedom, for this there shall be scourging, but they shall not be put to death because she was not free. What's the situation? The situation is this, that this concubine, this slave girl, some of your translations may have, that she was actually owned by someone else. And this other man comes, and it seems to imply that she really didn't have any choice in the matter, that he just took her and did what he wanted with her. It says there, for this there shall be scourging. That's a whipping. And in verse 21, he shall bring his trespass offering to the Lord to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, a ram as a trespass offering. The priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the trespass offering before the Lord for his sin which he has committed. And the sin which he has committed shall be forgiven him at that point if he does those things. So look, here's what we do. We read that and we go, wait a minute. God was okay with people owning slave girls, and his sin is just going to be forgiven? This is a deterrent for anybody that would do that. A scourging would be a deterrent. You do this, you're going to get whipped, and then also you have to bring this sacrifice. So what he's doing is he's deterring people from mistreating this concubine. Still, we go, well, wait a minute, as a concubine, why was God okay with that or whatever? He allowed certain things for a certain time within these certain times. I'm trying to think of the other word, but certain times he would allow things. But again, this is not something that's okay with God. He doesn't want people to own a bunch of women, obviously. That's not something that's allowed by him. But in this instance, this happens. He tells them how to be holy in this matter. To be holy in this matter, you got to beat that guy. He deserves a beating, a whipping. And then he has to bring also this sacrifice. Let's move on. Verses 23 through 25, he talks about their fruit trees when they get into the promised land. I'll just summarize this for you real quickly. They were not allowed to eat the fruit for the first 4 years. In the 5th year, they could eat it. What? By faith. Don't eat the fruit. Leave it alone for 4 years. Trust me, I'll provide for you. In the 5th year, you can start eating it. He does mention a little clue in here as to why he did this. Verse 25, in the 5th year you may eat its fruit, that it may yield to you its increase. He gives a little clue that leave the trees alone for the 4 years. The 4th year fruit, it's dedicated to God. The 5th year you can eat it, but seems to be that's what's healthiest for the trees. You want to have fruitful trees? Leave them alone for the first few years. Don't eat the fruit. Some of you may have had some kind of experience with that, where you plant a fruit tree and maybe it sprouts some fruit and you eat it and you're like, oh, that's nasty. And someone may have shared with you that, yeah, the tree's not really old enough yet. Give it some time for the fruit to mature, and then you can eat it. Verse 26. Now, verses 26. Here's what I believe. Verses 26 through 31 all have to do with pagan rituals. I believe that verses 26 through 31 all have to do with pagan rituals. Verse 26, you shall not eat anything with the blood. I believe that has to do with pagan rituals. I do not think that applies to the steak that you like rare or medium rare, with a little bit of pink in there, a little bit of blood. Some people like it like that. I do not think that's what he's talking about. I think that what he's talking about is consuming blood as part of a pagan ritual. Okay? You shall not eat anything with the blood, nor shall you practice divination or soothsaying. These are things that had to do with pagan rituals or the occult. These are actually things that are still practiced to this day. And these things carry over into the New Testament. It's clear even in the New Testament that we're not to have any part of these things. Now, in case you're thinking, well, what do you mean, it's still around for the day? Soothsaying is the prognostication, listen to this, of favorable times for specific forms of action. This was predicting lucky days or favorable times, as an astrologer or others might do. I have noticed over the last few years, it comes in waves. It comes and goes. And it's back again. And I have noticed that there are quite a few celebrities or well-known social media celebrities. Some people are famous, and then some people are like, they're Instagram famous. They're not really famous, they're just Instagram famous. I have noticed that there are a lot of people, and specifically, I've noticed a lot of female celebrities that they're into the divination, the soothsaying. And you will most often see it in the form of cards. They'll have cards with different symbols on it, not plain cards like we have here, but cards specifically for foretelling the future. And what they'll do is you'll see them on there, and they'll be talking to you, and and they've got all their makeup all done. They got the glow up and all of that, and they got their cards, and they're just okay, let's see what the cards hold for you today. And then they'll throw down some cards, and they'll say, well, this one right here means that you need to talk to new people today because it's going to open up some doors of opportunity. And this one here means that you need to steer clear of negative people. And this card here says that you should do this and that today. And what that is it's just a form of divination and soothsaying. It's the same thing. It's pagan rituals. It's a cult. And it has never been approved by God. It never will be approved by God. That is, we'll talk about some more things here in just a moment. But those are things that are seeking to usurp God's authority, to take God's authority, or to go around God. And, well, I'm not going to commit my day to God today because I saw my favorite celebrity with the cards, and their cards said that, I should do this or do that today. And we base our life or our day or our decisions or our mindset on what these cards are telling me. And oftentimes People will, you've heard of horoscopes and the alignment of the planets or the stars. And well, today, I'm an Aquarius, and so, this is my month, and, I need to do this, today, and, next week, and, the planets are lined up and the stars. And so, this is the kind of life that I'm going to have. And what God is saying here is, listen, that's all part of witchcraft. It's all part of pagan rituals. It's a cult. And you're not to have anything to do with that. There are no lucky days or favorable times. The idea is that what God wants his people to do, and this has not changed from Leviticus 19 until now, is that every morning we dedicate our life to the Lord. And a prayer of mine every day is that, God, I pray that you would direct me, even when I don't know you're directing me. Lord, I'm going to go. I've got things that I need to get done today or whatever. I'm just going to plan on doing those. But you direct me, God. I don't want to try to direct my own life according to what I'm being told through these cards or what the planets might line up or whatever. I'm not doing that. That's part of these pagan rituals. What I want to do instead is just commit my life to the Lord every day. Simple. I don't have to wait for these cards to be so-called read or things to line up. I just say, Lord, I'm yours today. Again, please take my heart, direct me, even when I don't know you're directing me. And here I go, Lord. I commit my day to you, and I just get out there. And we're going to face challenges and good times and bad times, and things will sometimes they'll go great for us, and other times they'll go terrible. But that's all at the Lord's choosing. I'm His. Lord, you direct my day. He goes on to say in verse 27, I believe, again, let me say this, from verse 26 to 31, I believe that all of this has to do with pagan rituals. Verse 27, you shall not shave around the sides of your head. Some of you are so guilty, man. I just got a haircut. Guilty. You shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor shall you disfigure the edges of your beard. You guys ain't got to worry about that yet. You will, though. What is he talking about? Look at this. It gets even better. Verse 28. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am the Lord. Man, some of your parents have tattoos. Oh, man. What is he talking about? As I told you before, this is why I made such a big deal out of it, because you were wondering, why does he keep telling us that? I believe that verses 26 through 31 deal with pagan rituals, occult practices. And it is known that part of those pagan rituals at those times, that they would even disfigure their outward appearance. Shaving of the sides of your head, disfiguring the edges of your beard, making cuttings in their flesh for the dead, tattooing themselves. These were things that they did as part of their pagan rituals. So we're all wondering right now. We don't care. We don't care about the shaving of the sides of the head. We don't care about the beard because you ain't got one. And we don't even necessarily care about the cuttings in your flesh. What we're all focused on is, but what about the tattoos, man? I'm planning to get a tattoo. When I turn 18, I'm saving up money, and I've already got it designed, and I'm going to go to I'm going to get a tattoo, and maybe your parents have tattoos, and oh man, are we practicing pagan rituals, and are we part of the occult? Yes? No, I'm just kidding. What is he talking about? Is it okay to get tattoos? Now, let me share something with you. That really is the one. That's the one everybody's thinking about. Let me mention this before I get there. Verse 27, you shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor disfigure the edges of your beard. How many of you have seen Orthodox Jews with curly hair right here, long? Anybody? Anybody seen them? They dress in all black. There's different types, but they'll have usually be wearing a black hat. They'll have the sides of their head or their hair are grown long. And then they have long beards, because what they did was they came to Leviticus 19 and they said, hey, we're not supposed to shave our heads. So what they'll do is they'll cut all the rest of their hair, but just leave those marks, those pieces right there, so that they're not breaking the law. And then they won't cut their beard because it says, don't disfigure the edges of your beard. I believe that that's not what God is telling these people to do. I think that the people were free to get a haircut if they want it. At some point, you got to cut your hair, unless you're going for the Guinness, record. But at some point. So this is why I kept pointing out. I believe that these things, he was telling them, don't do this as part of your pagan rituals, because the priests of those pagan religions were known for disfiguring themselves in order to try to appease their god, whatever god they were trying to attract attention from. And then, you shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead. Listen, I don't even want to make any cuttings in my flesh for the living. Okay? It's just not a good idea. Now, if I cut myself accidentally, is that, no, that's not what he's talking about. What I don't want to do is make cuttings in my flesh on behalf of the dead. Okay? Now, I wonder if he is talking about making cuttings in the flesh to try to reach the dead. I don't know if that's what he's saying, but I wonder if I'm trying to get, he's going to say in verse 31, he's going to talk about mediums and familiar spirits, those who try to reach the dead. And I wonder if in that, at times people would cut themselves to try and get the attention of their dead relative. I don't know for sure, but again, it's just not a good idea to put cuttings in your flesh. But what about tattoos, man? Now, let me say this. What I believe he's saying in verse 28 is this: you shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you for the dead. That's what I believe it's saying. Let me share something with you. When I was growing up in San Bernardino, we grew up in San Bernardino. You have the west side of San Bernardino. You've got the east side of San Bernardino. You've got the north side of San Bernardino, and the south side nobody cares about. So on the west end of San Bernardino, and it's literally, you cross a bridge, and they call it the west side. You're on the west side. Okay? West side, coming from the west side. So you go over there, and that is where predominantly on that side of the freeway was where all the Hispanic people, or you call yourself Latino, whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to call yourself. Okay, brown people, okay? They all lived on that side. That's where my parents, they grew up on that side of town. And so my grandparents from both sides lived on the west side of town. So holidays, different things that we would celebrate, we would go over to my grandparents' house. We would go over the bridge, you come down onto the west side, and that was predominantly where the Hispanic, Latino population lived. They were spread out, obviously, but here's the thing. Pastor Chris grew up on the east side of town. When I was growing up on the east side of town, when I was younger growing up, my neighborhood was predominantly older Caucasian. Do you know what Caucasian means? I'm trying to sound proper. What does it mean? White. Right? You guys kind of said it like white. Caucasian people. White people. We have to be so careful. Huh? Don't call people by the whatever. You guys understand what I'm saying. So I grew up in that type of a neighborhood. I wasn't like a gangster or anything growing up. You probably knew that already. You're looking at me like, yeah, I can tell you weren't a gangster. But that's where I grew up, okay? And honestly, there was not another Hispanic family. There wasn't even a black family in the neighborhood for quite a while. One of my best friends, and we're still friends to this day, moved in 2 doors down from me. Him and his mom and his sister, they were a black family. And then several years later, there was another black family that moved in down at the opposite end of my street. And, we hung out with whoever, everybody, it really didn't matter. But that was the neighborhood that I grew up in. It was not like, but here's the thing. You drive over to the west side of town. And that's where predominantly it was Hispanic people there. And along with that, there was a certain culture. It was gangs over there. There still is to this day. Gangs over there on that end. And part of that lifestyle was you would always have people that were in and out of jail, in and out of prison all the time. You just get arrested, they come out, and people in the neighborhood knew them, and that's everybody just knows, oh, that's Johnny or whatever, and man, yeah, he's out of jail, but he'll probably be back in 2 weeks or whatever. oftentimes those individuals, there were individuals within that segment of society that would, as you can imagine, they would do drugs. A lot of people did drugs. They still do. But part of that was, as I was growing up, is there were people who would shoot heroin into their body, into their veins. And oftentimes those people had tattoos. And the reason they had tattoos was to hide the track marks. They were called tracks. You put a needle in your arm, and their arms, if you got close enough, they would have all these needle marks in their arms from shooting drugs. And they would oftentimes have tattoos. So growing up, okay, now here's Pastor Chris, little kid, growing up. As I was growing up and going over to the west side and hanging out, and even as I got older, I spent a lot of time over there because a lot of my friends lived on that end of town. And growing up, I had this mindset that tattoos are for the drug addicts. Make sense? Yes or no? Yes? Makes sense. I had this attitude, tattoos are for the drug addicts. So growing up, I did not have a desire for tattoos because I did not want to, I don't mind getting shots, occasionally, but I don't want to just do it on purpose, man. Like, why would I do that? So that was my mindset. Now, as I got into high school, sophomore, like junior, senior year, 19, then I started like, oh, I want a tattoo, and I had this thing drawn out, like I want to get this, when I save up some money. And I can say to this day, right now, I can tell you that I'm so glad that I didn't have the money to get the tattoo. And I'm glad that I didn't get tattoos. How does all of that tie into what we're talking about? Was I part of the occult? Was I part of pagan rituals? No. But here's what God is saying here. Because some of you are like, oh, I didn't realize, my parents just told me you're not to get tattoos. I didn't realize it was part of pagan rituals. I'm not doing that, so I'm going to go home and tell my mom and dad it's okay to get tattoos. Pastor Chris said. Okay? Here's what's going on. God is telling his people here, you need to be holy. What are you saying? Tattoos aren't holy? My parents have tattoos. Are you saying they're not? No, that's not what I'm saying. What God is telling his people is, you need to be holy. And part of being holy means that you're in the world, but you're separate from the world. It means that I'm not trying to fashion myself after the world. So, what do I think about tattoos? I'm going to tell you what he's saying here. I'm going to tell you what I think. I don't care for tattoos. Now, I've got a daughter with some tattoos that she wasn't supposed to get. That's why she doesn't live with us anymore. No, I'm just kidding. She doesn't live with us anymore, but I love her to pieces. She's got some tattoos. Both of my sisters have tattoos. My brother-in-law, we were all together yesterday, and my brother-in-law's got tattoos. He's got some on his face and his neck, and his earlobe is tattooed, and his hands and his arms, and there's tattoos all over the place. I love him to death. I got no beef with those guys. They're cholos anyways. I don't want to fight them, but I have no problem with them. They want to have tattoos, they can have tattoos. My family, those that have tattoos, along with the rest of my family, but I'm pointing out those that have tattoos, they love the Lord, man. They love the Lord. They're involved in ministry. They're involved in prison ministry. They lead worship. They teach Bible studies. They love the Lord. I do not question that at all. I know that their tattoos they don't have anything to do with pagan rituals. If they want to get the tattoos, they can. I don't want them. I'm glad I never got them. What I don't want to do is and this goes for every area of our lives, Fusion. What we don't want to do is do things just because the rest of the world is doing it. That's what God is saying here. Is let's be different. Let's be different. Let's not do it just because my favorite celebrity is doing it, or this person that I think looks really cool. Let me just do whatever they're doing. What I need to do is set my sights on God and just do whatever's going to be pleasing to him. Okay? Tattoos, that's between you. Obviously, right now, it's between you and your parents and God. But as you get a little bit older, you got your own money. Tattoos, that's between you and God. Okay? So, What is he saying here? He's saying, I believe he's saying that there were people as part of these pagan rituals that would tattoo themselves, not just cut their flesh, but also tattoo themselves for dead people, for the dead. Let's move on, verse 29. I believe that this is still part of the same section here. Do not prostitute your daughter to cause her to be a harlot, lest the land fall into harlotry and the land become full of wickedness. I always get mixed up. We started at 11:30, right? Oh, man. Do not prostitute. There were oftentimes young women would be given as prostitutes to temples, to pagan temples. So he says, don't do that. Verse 30, what you need to do, this is what you need to be concerned about. Keeping my Sabbaths, remember, his special day, and reverencing his sanctuary. So you stay focused on God. Witchcraft, verse 31, give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits. These are people that try to contact the dead in order to get some info from them. That's demonic. You may see it on TV. Hey, but they got this information that nobody else knew. It's demonic. Demons have been around for thousands of years. They know every intimate part of our lives, or your grandpa's life. And so when someone says, "Oh, I contacted your grandpa, and he told me this information that nobody else knew." Well, maybe nobody else on earth knew, but demons know it, and they pretend to be your grandpa. And hey, they give you this information. You think, "Oh, this is real." No, it's not. It's demonic. Stay away from it. Verse 32 through 34, he tells him, esteem others. Respect the gray-headed, the older people. If a stranger dwells with you in verse 33, don't mistreat them. Love them as yourself. And then finally in verses 35 and 36, be fair to people. No injustice in judgment. Don't fix your weights and measurements so that you can cheat people. Don't do that. And in verse 37 we finish. Therefore you shall observe all my statutes and all my judgments and perform them. I am the Lord. So you just stay focused on me, love me, do what I'm telling you to do.